Autumn Martinez is with Maricopa County Environmental Health, and Autumn will be giving a presentation called Stormwater Never Travels Alone.
Autumn Martinez is the Stormwater Supervisor for the Stormwater Quality Program at Maricopa County's Environmental Services Department. She graduated from Arizona State University with a bachelor's degree in life sciences with an emphasis on ecology and animal behavior. She has worked for environmental services for 17 years, first as an environmental health specialist in the chain and institutional food programs. She joined the Stormwater program in 2015 as an inspector and then became the supervisor in 2018.
All right, and then Autumn, if you're ready, feel free to share your presentation and unmute yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Autumn Martinez, and thank you for the introduction. And I coordinate the Stormwater Quality Program at Maricopa County. And I have 3 staff members who have different roles in the program. So we do inspecting, outreach, and admin. And I also help coordinate activities among the different county departments that may impact stormwater. So this is just our department's vision and mission statements. So I'm sure a lot of you on the call have seen these before. So today what I would like to go over is kind of how stormwater programs began, and what stormwater is, and the common pollutants that we see, and what we do in Maricopa County to meet the requirements for a stormwater program. And then I'll wrap up with some stormwater issues that some of you may see in your line of work as sanitarians. So let's dive into how it all began. So the basis for the Clean Water Act actually happened in 1948. And that was called the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. In the 1960s, though, the Cuyahoga River in Ohio caught fire over a dozen times. It was often referred to as the river that oozes because it was so polluted. The fire in 1969 was immortalized on the cover of Time magazine, which is the picture here. So the public, when they saw this, was outraged. And that eventually led to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. So the Clean Water Act, as we know it, became established in 1972 and has been revised several times since. So the 1987 revision, known as the Water Quality Act of 1987, came about because of a study that estimated about 30% of the pollution to the nation's waters comes from stormwater and urban runoff. So the Water Quality Act created the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES, as I will call it. We do like our acronyms also in this department. So the NPDES permits allow for discharge of an acceptable level of pollutants, and it also ensures that states meet federal minimum standards for clean water. So there were 2 phases to the NPDES. Phase 1 began in 1990 and required permitting of stormwater discharges from existing facilities, industrial activity, and large and medium municipal storm sewer systems, or MS4s, serving populations greater than 100,000 people. So phase 2 in 1999 required that any construction site that is disturbing over an acre of land to obtain a permit. And it also brought in smaller municipalities with populations between 10,000 and 100,000. So in Arizona, the NPDES program is administered by the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. And this program is known as the Arizona Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or ASIPDES. So the Clean Water Act does not define waters of the United States, or WOTUS, as we call them. The EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers have tried to define WOTUS through regulation. But if any of you follow water news, you will know that there are always challenges to these definitions, and those definitions can change depending on which political party is in power. So with Obama's administration, they pushed through some fairly stringent WOTUS definitions and rules. So Arizona was one of 13 states that sued over the proposed waters. And so we were never enforcing those rules. And then when Trump's administration came into power, it was kind of went the opposite way. And his EPA passed the navigable water rules. So basically, they eliminated ephemeral waters from being jurisdictional. So ephemeral just means it flows in response to rain, and they're dry the rest of the time. So for desert states like us, about 90% of our waterways are ephemeral. So that left quite a bit of our waterways without any type of protection. And this was also challenged and thrown out by a court, I believe in 2021. So with the definition of regulated water bodies being left open and vague, there have been at least 4 major Supreme Court cases that have also addressed regulated water bodies. So you may have seen recently, this one just settled a couple months ago. It was the Sackett's versus the EPA. So basically the Sackett's wanted to build on a lot across the road from a lake in Idaho that was designated as a WOTUS. So from what I've followed, they even had like an environmental consultant who told them that they would have to abide by the Clean Water Act. But when they began building, the Army Corps of Engineers determined they were interfering with a wetland for the lake and couldn't continue. So the EPA, which holds enforcement power, filed legal to stop the Sackett's. Obviously, it went through all the courts, ended up in the Supreme Court, which ruled in favor of the Sackett's. So the Supreme Court decided that the wetland on their property was not contiguous with the lake. So it was not a WOTUS. So I'm kind of generalizing this case a lot, but their ruling ended up being a blow to the Biden administration, which was also trying to push through their own definitions for WOTUS. So as you can see, excuse me, there are constant changes being made to what is a regulated water body and what is not. So recently, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality and the state of Arizona have passed some of their own water definitions into regulation to give the state an opportunity to protect some of those waters in the state, which that will be protected no matter which political party is in power at the federal level. So you can see it gets very complicated sometimes knowing what we are regulating. So what is stormwater exactly? So we always ask this question at our outreach events, and you might be surprised by some of the answers we hear from people, but it's actually very simple. I think a lot of people just kind of overthink what we're asking them. So basically, stormwater is any water produced by precipitation. So it's rain, hail, and snow. So generally, obviously, in the Phoenix area, we will see rain, occasionally hail, and very, very rarely some snow. Those of you that live at higher elevations, obviously, will get to see the snow runoff. So impervious surfaces. So in urban areas, stormwater is unable to infiltrate into the ground due to impervious surfaces. So impervious surfaces just don't allow water to absorb in, obviously. So it's like concrete. So it runs off of roofs, sidewalks, driveways, parking lots, and streets. So in rural areas, only 10% of rain is runoff. 40% is evapotranspiration, excuse me, and 50% infiltrates the ground. In urban areas with like 75 to 100% impervious surfaces, 55% is runoff, 30% evapotranspiration, and 15% infiltrates the ground. So where does all this water go? So once it runs off of the impervious surfaces, it goes into the municipal separate storm sewer system, or MS4, as I mentioned earlier. So this is different from the sanitary sewer that is connected to our houses and businesses. So as stormwater is collected in the streets via gutters, curb cuts, inlets, swales, or ditches, it does not go to a treatment plant like the sanitary sewer does. It goes directly into our neighborhood parks, green belts, washes, rivers, or oceans if you're lucky enough to live near an ocean. And the Water Quality Act of 1987 is when the rules for the retention of stormwater were enacted. This is when we started seeing all those green spaces going into neighborhoods to capture their stormwater. So they must be capable of retaining runoff from a 100-year storm. So how many of you have, this is a rhetorical question, but how many of you or your kids have played in those parks in the collected water after a big storm? So everything that is on the ground gets picked up by the stormwater and carried to wherever it drains. So if it is draining into that neighborhood park, all the pollutants picked up will be in that water. So these are some common urban pollutants we see, and I'll go into each of these in detail. So the stormwater runoff picks up these pollutants from the roads, sidewalks, and gutters and carries these pollutants into the storm drain. They are deposited then into a park, a wash, or a river, which is why stormwater never travels alone. All of these pollutants are what the EPA calls non-point source pollution. And that just means it usually comes from a broad area rather than a point source. So a point source is a single identifiable source, like an industrial facility or a wastewater treatment plant that is directly draining into a waterway. So sediment is pollution that occurs when loose soil runs off with stormwater. So this picture is somebody's failed sediment control here. You can see that sediment pollution is very costly. It's $16 billion annually. It causes water turbidity, which in turn inhibits plant growth and animal development. Animals can't see their food in the water. Sediment fish eggs. It can also carry excess nutrients that will increase algae growth or toxic agricultural and industrial compounds. In an urban setting, sediment can also clog storm drains, leading to flooding, and it can increase the cost of treating drinking water. And that treated water, or with a lot of sediment, can also result in taste and odor problems, which then in turn costs more to treat. So dog poop. Discussing dog poop is one of our favorite topics in stormwater. Much like those in food inspections like to talk about vomiting and diarrhea. So the kids we provide education to always enjoy this part. So I had to include some of their favorite pictures. They love these pictures whenever we bring them out to a classroom. So 1 gram of dog poop has 23 million bacteria, such as E. coli, Salmonella, and Campylobacter. One medium-sized dog will poop out about 3/4 of a pound per day. So it is estimated by the ASU Innovation Center that Maricopa County is home to about 900,000 dogs. And that adds up to a lot of dog poop, about 675,000 pounds a day. So as many of you that have dealt with poop complaints as a registered sanitarian, there are a lot of people out there who don't pick up after their dogs. So in addition to odor and fly breeding, that comes with dog poop, all those bacteria can get swept up in the stormwater. It contaminates the water in the park basin in your neighborhood that your kids may want to go play in after a big storm. So those microorganisms, as many of you probably know, can cause intestinal distress, skin rashes, and eye and ear infections. So in addition, if it's going into a waterway, it can make fish unsafe to eat. It can decrease the dissolved oxygen in the water as it decomposes, also harming fish and plant life. So trash. Trash is one of the big ones as well. So in 2021, 137 million tons of single-use plastics were produced, and this is increasing every year. So, and obviously many of us know that recycling programs have not been able to keep up with the demand for various reasons. So trash that's not disposed of properly can cause many problems that can range from people throwing their trash on the ground to illegal dumping of larger items to improperly maintained trash bins and landfills. So improperly disposed of trash can lead to clogged storm drains, attract pests, affect animal health and water quality. So if you were here in 2014, Hurricane Norbert rolled through here. And this was the I-10 freeway that day. So I don't know if the storm drains were clogged necessarily along this stretch, or if they just couldn't handle the amount of rain that we received in that amount of time. I suspect it was a little bit of both. But this is just a really extreme example of what could happen when storm drains do get clogged. So, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention PFAS and stormwater as well, because that has become a hot topic. in recent years. So I am by no means an expert on it, but they are becoming a very persistent problem as they do not break down easily, hence the nickname forever chemicals. So forever chemicals are found in humans, animals, and almost all ecological systems. And they can accumulate in the environment and in the tissues of us and animals, affecting our health. So right now, there's not really an easy answer for eliminating them from the environment. It is extremely costly to do and time consuming, and the contamination is very widespread. So these are going to kind of round up the rest of the common pollutants that we see in stormwater. So oil, fertilizers, and pesticides. So just a few things you could do with your car or your vehicle. Keep your car maintained in good repair. Have a drip pan handy if you have leaks, and to wash your car at a commercial car wash. I can also add that if you do wash your car at home, if you try to do it over a landscaped area or like a grassy area where the water can absorb in, and use a biodegradable soap. And then don't use any pesticides or fertilizers before predicted rain, and apply according to manufacturer instructions. So this is definitely not an all-inclusive list. There are things like yard waste that we see commonly, leaves from trees, grass clippings in the gutter. Those are very common at plugging up storm drains. I just wanted to touch on some of the more common ones that we see though. So what we do in Maricopa County, kind of jumping back to the regulations that I was talking about earlier. So we're a small MS4 permit that was issued to us by ADQ. We have a stormwater management plan, or SWAMP, with these 6 minimum control measures required by the EPA for small MS4 phase 2 permits. So we have to do public education and outreach, public participation and involvement, illicit discharge detection and elimination, construction site runoff, post-construction site runoff, and pollution prevention, good housekeeping for municipal operations. So in Maricopa County, we have jurisdiction only in the urbanized, unincorporated county areas. So that kind of limits our areas where we have jurisdiction in. The urbanized areas are designated by the US Census Bureau in the decennial census every year. So according to the 2020 census, the total population of Maricopa County was 4.4 million, and that includes all the cities and surrounding areas. So the unincorporated urbanized area population was approximately 150,000. Public outreach activities are centered on cultivating a deeper understanding and general awareness of the importance of stormwater pollution prevention. So our public outreach activities are part of organized events and at locations such as schools, regional libraries, public parks, community colleges, and other public settings. We get invited a lot to STEAM and STEM nights at elementary schools, and we always get very busy around Earth Day. And dog events are always very popular too. So last year we reached over 2,500 people with the stormwater pollution prevention message in cities throughout Maricopa County. The school outreach program focuses on in-person classroom education. So we offer grade-specific classroom workshops to K through 8th grade students within Maricopa County. And we were able to reach last year just over 1,200 students. So if any of you are in Maricopa County and have a student in grade K through 8th, we would be happy to come out to their classroom. So public participation and involvement. So our stormwater management plan is posted online for the public to view, and we have a survey form available for members of the public to provide input and participate in building the plan. We offer a stormwater themed poster contest for grades 3 through 6, and it's open to any school or homeschool in Maricopa County. So the winners are presented at the Board of Supervisors meeting each year. And that's been a big success for us. The Department of Transportation also participates in our public participation involvement. So they have an Adopt a Road program where citizens and groups can adopt a McDOT-owned road, and they're responsible for at least 2 trash cleanups along their adopted section every year. So McDOT crews will even come and pick up the trash once it's bagged for the group. So last year, their Adopt a Road program cleaned 95 miles of county roadway and disposed of 801 bags of trash and 23 tires. So a total of 459 volunteers participated in 80 cleanups and clocked a total of 803 volunteer hours. And then our Parks Department also hosts public cleanup events with their Adopt a Trail program and shoreline cleanups at Lake Pleasant. So they also hosted about 73 cleanups and maintenance events last year that resulted in participation from over 1,000 people and over 4,000 volunteer hours at the 13 different parks located throughout Maricopa County. So I just want to give a little quick shout out to our 3rd and 4th grade winners. So our theme this year was Be the Solution to Stormwater Pollution. And then our 5th and 6th grade winners from this past contest as well. So the kids get better every year. It's always very hard to judge them. So illicit discharge and detection elimination, or IDDE. This is the part of our permit where we conduct inspections, some of them proactive, some of them in response to complaints. So we inspect the entirety of our jurisdictional areas within the 5 years of our permit term. So we also go out in the rain to monitor for pollutants and take samples to be lab tested. So the samples are a new requirement from ADQ this permit term. So I believe they are working on a baseline of what pollutants are being discharged into our waterways. So we will probably see some new permit terms added, new permit requirements added in the future because of what they may find. So when it is dry, we monitor for any unauthorized discharges into our storm drains. And most of our complaints usually involve pool draining into the road. So this one's a little complicated, but we do allow pool draining if it has been dechlorinated. A lot of cities do not allow that. We allow it because many of our unincorporated residents are on a septic system, and it would be impossible to drain into a sewer cleanout, which is the recommended practice. So when we're out in the field and we see water when it hasn't rained in a while, we'll trace it back to the source if possible. Since we are a small group, though, we do rely on other departments and citizens to notify us when they see something. So our Department of Transportation and Flood Control District will respond to complaints that involve their structures or right of way. And this picture that I added on the slide here is one of my favorite complaints that has come to us over the years. So it was probably one of the most extreme examples we have seen of an illicit discharge. So it came from a charter school camera, and it turned out to be in another city's jurisdiction. So they ended up taking the lead on it, but we started the initial investigation. And I ended up just following the case through the years just to see the outcome. So most of you will probably recognize that this is a septic truck, and the driver decided to empty his tank into the school storm drain in the parking lot on the weekend. So he was caught on their cameras. So I have like the whole video of it actually. And as I mentioned earlier, stormwater rules require that water is retained on site. So this particular storm drain went to a green basin area near the playground. So and at the end of this, the driver ended up getting arrested. He was actually sentenced to a couple years in jail, and the owner of the company ended up with some pretty huge fines, and the company is no longer in business. So now every time I see a septic truck parked somewhere, I'm automatically suspicious that they're dumping, even though that is probably not the case, like 99.9% of the time. We've also had a few complaints over the years about RVs dumping their gray water into gutters and storm drains, and one that dumped some kind of fuel. The fuel one was in Anthem, so it went directly into a wash because Anthem was actually built with a permit that allowed them to plan and build their neighborhood around all of the natural washes in that area. And they did not build many retention areas. So Anthem's HOA actually beat me to the complaint site since it happened over Thanksgiving weekend. And they already had an environmental cleanup company out there on site. And they ended up charging the homeowner for the cleanup and said they would put a lien on their home if they didn't pay. So they take it very seriously out there in Anthem. They keep their washes they take their washes very seriously out there. So if any of you live out there, you may know that already. Construction. So we have an ordinance that requires the use of sediment and erosion control practices during construction. Since sediment is the most common pollutant in Arizona, The county's planning and development department issues stormwater construction permits, and the drainage inspectors follow up with the routine inspections to ensure dirt that is loosened up is not going to go into the wash or not going to wash into the storm sewer system. So the picture on the left is a straw wattle. The picture on the right is a silt fence. So both of these allow water to travel through while holding loose dirt back onto the site. So if they were not installed properly, or if they were in disrepair, because they do get run over often on these construction sites, and also I should add that wild animals do like to eat the straw wattles, so we will come on site sometimes and find them chewed through. That would be a violation. So these are the most common best management practices that we see for sediment on construction sites. So the next time you go by a construction site, you know what the giant straw snake is used for, if you didn't already know. So other violations we may see on construction sites are improper chemical storage, improper equipment cleaning, and improper concrete washout. So if any of you have ever driven through a construction site and have seen them using kiddie pools for concrete washout, those are technically not really approved for concrete, but they're often used. The closest thing I could think of in food inspections that would be equivalent to the kiddie pools in establishments that have home style fridges, refrigerators that I'm sure some of you have come across. I have been out of food inspections for a while, so I'm not sure how common they still are, but I remember coming across them often when I first started. So the refrigerators are getting the job done, but they are not NSF approved. So this is kind of the same thing. When we conducted construction site inspections, if the pools were in good repair and used for small amounts of concrete washout, they would be okay. Or the pool was broken, that would be a violation. So for post-construction, there are various ordinances to ensure that post-construction stormwater runoff is handled appropriately. So projects need to be able to capture stormwater runoff from a 100-year storm. So this term just means all areas of a watershed will receive 3.4 inches of rain in a 6-hour period. So in most places, we usually see a basin, such as the one pictured above. This is also where we see playgrounds installed and where kids like to play after a big storm. So this is what I was talking about when kids like to play in the rainwater. The storm wasn't big enough to fill it up, but we have had some storms that do fill these up. So a lot of these basins will have dry wells to help capture the water. Those allow it to more readily soak into the ground. And as a side note, water is supposed to drain within 72 hours also to avoid mosquito breeding. So stormwater inspectors inspect post-construction projects once a year to look for damage and ensure maintenance is being performed. So this picture is actually a very well-maintained post-construction basin with dry wells. Poorly maintained, we'll see erosion and or damage to the structures that convey the water. So, and also increasing in popularity is low impact development or green infrastructure. So those provide a more natural space to help filter and absorb stormwater where it falls using native plant and soil systems. They will also provide us with better biodiversity and lower temperatures by providing shade and less concrete. So, and they're also more aesthetically pleasing. So, and something also new that's we've started seeing more of is there is pavement and pavers that are pervious that will allow water to soak through. So some of you may be wondering why these aren't used more. They do require additional prep work, so they're more expensive to install. They require more maintenance as the pores can become clogged, so it require regular inspections and regular industrial vacuuming to keep them clear. And they cannot sustain heavy vehicles for an extended amount of time, so they can't be used for highways or other roadways that are used by heavier vehicles such as semi-trucks. To fulfill the permit requirements for pollution prevention and good housekeeping for municipal facilities, we coordinate with other county departments, such as our transportation, flood control, equipment services, waste resources and recycling, facilities management, and risk management to ensure their activities are not contributing to stormwater pollution. So our MCDOT sweeps and maintains all the county streets. Flood control maintains their structures. Equipment services, they conduct site inspection, ensure any spills are cleaned up properly, and oil and tires are disposed of properly. Waste resources maintain and report landfill and transfer station inspections. Facilities management will oversee any repairs. And lastly, risk management provides compliance assistance with hazardous chemical storage, communication regulations, assistance with hazardous waste storage and disposal, and assistance with cleanup of illegal dumping sites, spills, and leaks. So the stormwater program, we provide training on spill cleanup, fleet maintenance, building and grounds maintenance, and chemical storage for all county employees. So these are, and then we also conduct routine inspections of all the county facilities. So the county owns and or operates about 541 facilities, and they are inspected based on the risks they can propose to stormwater pollution. So it ends up being quite a few inspections a year. It does keep us busy, but some of the departments do have their own inspection programs as well as standard operating procedures to address pollution issues. So these were just some pictures I've taken on sites. The one on the left is a good example of the containment of their chemicals by our flood control district. So the one on the right is one of our transfer stations that collect trash from the public who may not have trash service. So they also offer green waste collection events 4 times a year. So green waste is then, all the green waste collected is then ground down, into like a mulch, and they use that to cover the top of the landfills to maintain their cap on them. So what you can do to help. So this may be some things you may see out in the field in your line of work. So for restaurants, so as a former restaurant inspector, I do know that what is going on outside of the restaurant is definitely less of a worry than what may be going on inside that has a potential to cause illness. So sometimes it could be just something as simple as driving around the building as you arrive, just to kind of glance at what is going on, just in case you can't make it back outside during the inspection. So one of the first places I suspended as a new inspector had sewage backing up out of a manhole near one of the entrances. If I hadn't driven around to park on the other side of the building, I might have missed my first clue that the plumbing was going very wrong. So the drains inside were backing up, so that was why they were suspended. But as a stormwater inspector now, I realized that the sewage bubbling out of the manhole was probably going into a storm drain in the parking lot. So some things to look for at a restaurant. Trash and grease bins are not overflowing, or tightly closed when not in use and are in good condition. So any spills that happen are cleaned up promptly and appropriately. And not to mention that any spills or trash on the ground will attract roaches and rodents to the property. And eventually they do make their way inside of an establishment. Floor mats should not be cleaned outside, but in a mop sink or even in place where the wash water drains to the floor drain. And one thing I saw from another jurisdiction is that they encourage their restaurants to take them to a local car wash to be cleaned. So I guess that could be a possibility as well. So dirty mop water should not be dumped outside onto the ground or into a storm drain. It should be dumped into a mop sink. For hosing and power washing of the drive-through and parking lot, I know a lot of places do this. I see it all the time. So power washing of the drive-through, and so doing this, the water should be collected utilizing a shop vac and disposed of in a sanitary sewer. It should not be running down the street. I've seen mobile car wash businesses utilize that method, and it works really well. Or they can sweep rather than use water. So, and then I realized yesterday I probably should have included a slide about food trucks also. So I've had 2 complaints about food trucks in my career in stormwater. So both of the complaints involved them dumping their gray water out onto the ground. One of them I was actually able to verify because they did this in front of their house, and it went across the street into the park where this stinky, greasy water was just accumulating because it had clogged the drain there also. So we ended up sending the homeowner a notice of violation, got the HOA involved. So the HOA did clean up the park area. I did not follow up to see if they took action against the homeowner though. The other complaint was a food truck that was dumping their gray water into a parking lot. That one I was not able to verify since the food truck was long gone, and we were unable to even verify which food truck it was because the name we were given did not match up with any registered food truck permits for Maricopa County. So swimming pools, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. I will generally encourage people to check with their municipality because the rules do vary from place to place. So, and some municipalities charge a small permit fee for draining pools into the sanitary sewer. And almost all of them would like a heads up that thousands of gallons of pool water are going to be coming into their treatment plants because they may need to adjust the chemistry to accommodate all that extra water. So, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of Maricopa County, unincorporated Maricopa County, is on septic systems since we do not have a public water service. So obviously draining your pool into a septic tank is a bad idea. So we do try to encourage people to keep as much of the water on their property as possible and to ensure that it is dechlorinated before they drain. So illegal dumping. I know with Maricopa County, we have enforcement specialists that respond to illegal dumping complaints. Sometimes my group will assist also if it's in one of our urbanized unincorporated areas. So in addition to being a public health nuisance, as I have mentioned earlier, trash can clog storm drains and waterways, causing flooding. Some items can harbor mosquito breeding. Sometimes items are dumped that can have a significant impact on the immediate ecology and the potential to spread downstream. So these pictures were all taken at a site on private property near the Salt River that had been dumped on for years and years. So I went out there with our senior enforcement specialist and a City of Phoenix inspector. There was everything out there from boats to tires to large buckets and barrels of unknown chemicals. So, and I lost count of the number of used oil containers that we found. So somebody was running probably an auto business out of their garage and just bringing all their used oil out there. So we coordinated with the property owner in City of Phoenix, and the site did finally get cleaned up and the property was fenced in. So a few other things that we've been asked about is residents wanting to use gray water for their landscaping. That is something that we would allow as long as they keep the water on their property. Once it leaves their property and enters the street, it would be considered a violation. So a lot of times with enforcement actions, we provide education first and allow the resident to correct the violation. If it is not corrected, then we will follow through with legal action. So, and we're often asked about rain collection and rain barrels. And as far as I know, as of right now, Arizona does not have any laws restricting rain collection. I do know other states around us do. But as always, I would always encourage people to check with their local jurisdiction because cities do pass other ordinances. And over the last 6 months or so, I've also been contacted by several people wanting to start power washing businesses. I'm not sure why that just popped up all of a sudden, but I also always encourage them to reach out to whatever jurisdiction they're working in. Because as I said earlier, every city has their own stormwater program and may enforce rules just a little differently. So we each have our own stormwater management plans, and there are things that we do. And there's the different phases as well. So phase one places, which would be like Phoenix, Tempe, Mesa, Scottsdale, they have a different program, a slightly different program at the base. So a lot of it's still the same, but they have some different rules that they may enforce. So, and if I talk to somebody that wants to do the power washing, if they are in unincorporated Maricopa County, I do encourage them to try to capture their runoff, like using shop vacs, like I mentioned earlier, with mobile car washing, or even if they're hosing off the drive-throughs or parking lots. So I think these are some of the stormwater resources where if you want more information, the EPA has just tons of information on there. AZ Storm is a coalition of all the local jurisdictions here in the Valley and Pinal County as well. So we provide a lot of resources. We kind of pull our resources together to provide education. And so there's a lot of good resources on there and contacts for your municipality. So, and ADQ also has a lot of information about stormwater, and then our own stormwater page. So thank you. And if there's any questions, I know I kind of ended a little early. I get nervous and I talk really fast.
No worries, it happens. We do have some questions here for you, though.
Oh, fantastic.
All right, let's go ahead and pull those up. First question says, does this mean that the catchment areas may be highly polluted even when dry? They are often used for parks for small children. Is this a concern?
Yeah, it can be. If somebody is a microbiologist on the call, they may know better as far as like with the dog poop or like maybe the E. coli and stuff, how long that stays in the environment. I'm thinking it stays quite a while. But things like trash and stuff are easy to pick up. And if chemicals are being used properly, hopefully it wouldn't be, those wouldn't be leaching into the park or being swept down to the park. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Perfect.
But they can be.
Let's see. The next one here, what control measures are in place for prescribed fires to avoid having all the vegetative material from getting into the stormwater drains?
Oh, that one I do not know the answer to because I have not dealt with fires. But I do know that that has been something that has been talked about a lot, especially up in Flagstaff just recently, because they did have fires. Let's see.
Let's see. All right.
So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for fires.
No worries. With the rise of people living in RVs, can they discharge their gray water from their sink on their property if it stays on their property?
Yeah, I suppose they probably could. Again, it would depend on what jurisdiction they're in. And I have seen that a lot of people living in RVs aren't actually on their property. I've seen a lot of the, I guess they call it boondocking, where they're kind of everywhere, and that would probably not be allowed. And it just kind of pollutes everything. They really should be dumping it into a facility. So I guess if it's their own property, they could keep it, and they could keep it on their property, they could do it. But again, a lot of people that we've seen living in RVs are not on their own property. So they would be polluting somebody else's property if they're doing that.
Makes sense. Does the county perform some sort of cleanup / drainage of the sewage systems to minimize floodings during heavier rain months?
So yeah, that would fall to our flood control district and a little bit of the Department of Transportation as well. So they do perform cleanups. They also have inspection programs where they go through and inspect all of their streets and basins, canals, what have you, not canals, drainage features. So they do try to keep up on those. And I know flood control runs through multiple jurisdictions. So they do work a lot with all the other cities around the valley here to make sure that things are draining properly.
Right. Next question is there a place or places to take construction liquids, specifically instead of allowing them to evaporate or be stored?
It would depend on the liquid. It would probably have to go to like a hazardous waste dump, and that would depend on which jurisdiction you're in. I know there's fewer of them. I get a lot of calls for where to take things. And I usually refer people to whoever their trash service is. So sometimes, because I think Glendale landfill still takes some hazardous waste, and Phoenix probably does. And they might be the only two. And there are certain jurisdictions also that do hazardous waste events where they allow their residents maybe once a year to come drop off things. If it's commercial, like a business, construction business, they may have to apply for some different, there may be some different rules for them as far as where they can take it to, since it's more of an industrial thing.
Okay. This one is less of a question. Just says used to block the large drain and the surface of the neighborhood street with cardboard. Sailboat time.
Same. I do remember doing that as a kid. So, when you're ignorance is bliss sometimes.
Right. You gotta enjoy what you can. This one says straw what? I believe that it might be referring to the straw snakes that you were talking about, the straw wattles.
Wattles, yeah. Straw wattles. So we've heard the kids call them straw snakes. So
I mean, that's what I would call. That's
yeah.
Per the RV gray water question, ADEQ has specific regulations regarding the release of this type of gray water. I think your website has the info.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Definitely good to know.
Yeah.
And then the last question, is there a hotline or website to report suspected violations?
Yes. So if it's a stormwater violation, again, we only have jurisdiction in urbanized, unincorporated county areas. But I do have, so if I get a complaint that's for another jurisdiction, I have contacts at all of the cities now. So I can refer the complaint over. So you can call the Environmental Services main complaint line. I believe it's 602-506-6616. You would think I would know that number after being in the department for so many years. I think that's right. So, and then our website also would have a link for filing a complaint.
Perfect. I think there actually might be one more question. Do we know how much human waste resulting from the homeless population ends up contaminating stormwater?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know exact numbers, but I know that is probably fairly high, especially like around the Phoenix area there. Because I know, I don't know if all those people that were in the zone, this may change now that they're cleaning it up, but I don't know if all those people in the zone have had access to facilities. I actually had an event where I was with a Phoenix police officer that told me they were just hosing everything down when they'd go down to clean the streets, and everything was just getting hosed into the storm drain. I don't know if that's true or not. So, but I'm sure Phoenix stormwater program was probably involved in some of that there. But I don't know exact numbers, but I do know that has been definitely a concern over recent years with the increasing homeless population.
Perfect. Let's see. There's this one also for RVs. If they are connected to water, they're required to be connected to the sewer.
Yeah.
And then an additional question in the Zoom chat. Again, we would ask that you guys put these in Slido if possible. What is the difference between wildlife feces and dog feces and the impact on the environment?
So dogs in particular, and I believe it's because of their diet, is why they have a bit of a higher bacteria load than other animals. So I know, but again, in large numbers, if you're by a pig farm or a cow farm, in large numbers, that manure and waste is going to be a problem. But I think for dogs, their bacteria load is particularly high because of their diet.
Makes sense to me. Awesome. I think that about wraps up our questions. I don't see any others at the moment. Thank you so much for your presentation, Autumn. Really fantastic. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.